This video is one in a series on streamlining design and layout in AUD. In this video, you'll learn how to extend AUD so that you can easily lay out feeder and street light cables, which are not included in the out-of-the-box configuration. Now let's look at the out-of-the-box interface. If I click on the electric underground default pull-down, you can see there are defaults for primary, for secondary, and for service cables, but nothing for a feeder or street light cables. And if I look at the Draw Underground pull-down here, there are options for inserting primary, secondary, and service cables, but again, nothing for feeders or streetlights. To address things like this, you first need some background information. To begin, let's look at the current configuration for conductor models. Most of the underground cables are primary conductors, secondary conductors, or service conductors. But there's also a streetlight conductor here, and I've modified the out-of-the-box configuration so that there are two feeder conductors. Now note a couple things here. In all cases, the conductor construction is either direct buried or direct buried jacketed, and the conductor type is primary conductor, feeder conductor, and so forth. Now I'm going to look at the conductor construction and the conductor type domains. Here you can see all of the possible values for conductor types. And note both the columns for both values and IDs for the conductor type we're using. And here's the conductor construction domain. And again, we have values and associated IDs. Okay, to see how this works, let's now explore how primary cables are implemented. I'll go to the AUD options function and expand the default profiles section. There's only one profile currently defined, named default. I'll select that and then choose collection and click on the ellipsis. What you see here are all of the sections that appear on the overhead and underground default pull-downs. In particular, note there are 5 sections associated with underground, which correspond to these 5 sections on the default pull-down. Let's now look at how the primary underground section is defined. I'll select underground primary, and you can see several values. Primary indicates this label here on the default pull-down. Order determines which column it appears in, the odd numbers are to the left, and the order from top to bottom, so 1 will be at the top. Installation and line type are related to the macro in the CUI, which you can see here. Installation and line type are related to the macro in the CUI. Here's the macro for drawing underground primary lines, and you can see in this macro that installation is underground and the line type is primary. Now I'll select collection and click on the ellipsis. The collection in this case is a list of all the feature classes that appear in this section. If I look at the pull down, there's a default duct, the EL duct feature class, and a default conductor, the EL conductor feature class. Let's drill down on EL conductor. The feature class name is indeed EL conductor. If I select this collection and click on the ellipsis, I see 2 attributes within the EL conductor feature class: conductor type and conductor construction. I'll first select the ID conductor type, select collection, and click on the ellipsis. What is 4? Well, if you look at the domain listing for the conductor type, you can see that ID 4 refers to primary conductors. This is effectively defining a filter, saying that the only acceptable value for conductor type is primary conductors. Now let me hit OK and take a look at ID conductor construction, and again select collection and click on the ellipsis. Now I see 4 numbers, 3, 11, 1, and 9. If I look at the conductor construction domain, you can see that these are all values referring to valid underground conductor construction types, including direct buried and direct buried jacketed. This is also defining a filter, saying that only these 4 values are acceptable for conductor construction. Knowing all this, now let's improve our default screen to include feeder cables. I'll press OK to get back to the list of sections. For feeders, I'm going to want to add a new section. I'll click on Add. I'll make the display name feeder, the installation underground, and the line type, the word that would appear in the macro, will be feeder. Finally, I'll set the order to 1 because ultimately I want this to appear above primary. Now I'll select collection and click on the ellipsis. To match the others, I'll add both EL duct and the EL conductor feature class. Within EL conductor, I'll create a collection and add ID conductor type, I'll click on the collection here and set the conductor type to 10, the value for a feeder. Next, I'll add ID conductor construction and set the same values we had before, 3, 11, 1, and 9, which will match the values we had for primary conductors. That's it. Now I click on OK until I finish the command. Let's take a look at our new underground default pull-down. You can see now there's a new feeder section. Currently, it's appearing right under primary because both primary and feeders were set to an order number of 1. So before I go any further, I'm going to resort these items. I'll restart the AUD options command, select the default profile, and open the main collection. Now I'll make several changes. I'll select underground primary and set the order to 3. I'll select underground secondary and set the order to 5. I'll select underground service and set the order to 7. And finally, I'll select the fiber and set the order to 6 so it'll appear on the right side underneath the underground device section. Let's look at the final result. You can see that feeder, primary, secondary, and service are now sorted correctly on the left, and that fiber communication appears on the right under the devices section. Now let's follow a similar process to add streetlight cable to the default pull-down. This is almost exactly like adding feeder, except for one crucial difference. I'm navigating first to look at how service cable is configured. Notice here that unlike the other types of cable, the field line type keyword is set. It wasn't for any of the others. And what's odd is that the R is capitalized. To help you understand why, let's look at the 2 macros on the menu for inserting secondary cables and service cables. AutoCAD commands almost always have one-letter equivalents. Since secondary and service both begin with an S, we need a different single letter. And so in this case, R is that letter. That's why it's capitalized in the line type keyword field for service, and why it's capitalized in the macro. We're going to need to do the same thing for streetlights because that also begins with S. So let's do it for streetlights. I'll click on Add. I'll enter display name Streetlight. Installation will be underground. Line type will be streetlight. And I'll also add streetlight for the line type keyword, but I'll capitalize the T instead. I'll set the order to 8 so that it will appear under the fiber entry in the default screen. Clicking on Collection, the information is almost exactly the same as what was entered on the other cable types, except that the ID conductor type code is 9, which corresponds to streetlight conductor. I'll enter the rest of the information quickly here. I'll press OK a bunch of times when I'm done. And now let's look at the final result for our default dialog box. I'm not going to show you how to add these new commands to the ribbon because that's been covered in another video. However, to help you do that, here are the 2 macros that I would use to add feeder and to add streetlight cable. I hope you've learned a bit in this video. To further streamline your AUD design layout process, there are several other videos in this series, and I think you'll find them helpful.